Born on the planet Dathomir, the young Zabrak named Maul was taken by the Sith Lord Darth Sidious at a young age and subjected to an arduous life of training, moulding him into the perfect assassin. At the age of 22, Maul would become the first Sith to expose himself to the Jedi in 1,000 years. During the events of the Naboo Crisis, Darth Maul would engage in a fierce battle with the Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi. After a lengthy and well-fought battle, Maul killed the Jedi Master, but was cut down by his grief-stricken apprentice. Although believed to be dead, Maul was able to survive his injuries and spent the next decade devolving into madness. During the Clone Wars, Maul's brother Savage Opress would find him and bring him back to the Night Sister Witch, Mother Talzin. After having his mind and body restored, Maul took Savage as his apprentice and wreaked havoc across the galaxy for the next few years, attempting revenge against Kenobi several times, but ultimately failing. Maul's exploits across various political parties would eventually gain his former master's attention. Viewing Maul as a rival, Sidious murdered Savage and took Maul captive. After being rescued by his newly governed Death Watch, Maul and Talzin would attempt revenge against Sidious, but the ensuing battle forced Talzin to sacrifice her life in order to save her son. Maul would eventually lose control over the Death Watch and spent the remainder of his years in hiding. In one last effort to obtain vengeance, Maul would come out of exile and attempt to manipulate a newly formed band of rebels fighting against the Empire. The Zabrak's efforts would ultimately bring him face to face with his oldest and greatest enemy. After a duel of philosophies, the duo would engage in one final clash of sabers, with Maul suffering his final defeat. As Maul lay dying in the hands of his old wound, the two were finally able to make peace with each other, and Kenobi granted Maul the peace he so desperately desired. Darth Maul lived a life of harshness and unforgiving torment, yet he remains in history as one of the galaxy's most feared and formidable Sith. Venom was born into the 998th generation of an alien race known as the Clintar. Although a violent and dominant species, Venom was considered to be something of an outcast from his kin, due to his belief that the Clintar should seek to find a host body to survive and keep them, as opposed to his kin viewing all hosts as expendable. He would eventually make his way to Earth, and was soon bonded to Peter Parker, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Though he was granted with newfound strength, Peter eventually rejected his symbiotic partner, out of fear from the aggressive influence Venom had over his mind. Venom eventually found his way to a former news reporter known as Eddie Brock. Sharing a mutual hatred for Parker, the pair bonded together and would attempt to kill the web-slinger on many occasions, but would almost always fail. They would eventually become something of an anti-hero, viciously saving innocents from criminals, assisting in saving the world, and even working alongside Spider-Man to take down Venom's psychotic offspring, Carnage. Though vicious and aggressive in nature, Venom proved that when chaos ensues, sometimes the best response is to fight fire with fire. Maul will be represented as he appears in both the current canon and Legends continuity, towards the end of the Clone Wars. Venom will be represented mostly as he appears in Marvel Comics, as well as his namesake movie. Now let's get started.
Round 1.
Darth Maul was trained from childhood to be a living weapon. Since the majority of his training was dedicated to his martial skills, one would expect his physicality to be in high quality, and it most certainly was. At the time of the Clone Wars, Maul was aged in his mid-30s and remained at the peak of his physical prowess. As a member of the Zabrak race, the Sith assassin possessed a number of advantages over the typical human. The first was a set of horns forming a crown on his head, which could be used as a weapon to cause extra damage. The second advantage a Zabrak would boast would be their second heart, which granted greater blood flow and increased resistance to physical pain. In terms of strength, Maul has ripped a Varactal's head off without the aid of the Force, and when empowered, he could dent Droid Durasteel and overpower General Grievous. Maul's speed was even more deadly. Often described by his adversaries as a blur in battle, Maul could dispatch multiple targets in one swift motion, often moving too fast to be seen, and perform impressive displays of acrobatics that most Force users of his caliber would be hard-pressed to match. Maul has shown little signs of fatigue in battle, and was capable of taking on multiple opponents at once for extended periods of time, such as he did against Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, despite also possessing a leg injury at the time. But most impressive was his ridiculous resilience. Most notably, he managed to survive being cut in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi and sustain himself through his rage. During his fight with Pre Vizsla, he also managed to persevere through multiple close-range explosions without the aid of the Force. During his final test to see if he was worthy to be Sidious's apprentice, he spent an entire month isolated on a planet with limited rations and sleep, whilst constantly being hunted. Despite barely being able to stand due to fatigue and injury, when Sidious claimed to have a new apprentice, Maul became so engulfed by his rage that he felt strength like he had never before, and fully overcame the condition while he briefly clashed with his master. And finally, Maul's legs were replaced with prosthetics after his defeat by Kenobi, granting him the same maneuverability as his natural ones, but likely a higher level of durability overall. All in all, Darth Maul was a pure physical weapon. When the host is bonded with the Venom symbiote, they are granted a plethora of powers and abilities, but for now we'll be focusing on the physical aspects. The symbiote awards its host with increased strength, endurance, speed, and a rather potent healing factor. When the symbiote was bonded to Eddie Brock, his strength was increased to the point where he could lift a tank with little effort, rip steel doors off their hinges, and he was even able to match and surpass the strength of Spider-Man, who was said to be one of the strongest heroes within the Marvel Universe, only behind the likes of the Thing, the Hulk, and Thor, among a few others. So for a mere human to be granted such strength is really impressive. The speed and agility awarded to the host were also amped to an equally impressive level. For example, while bonded with the symbiote, Eddie Brock has been able to dodge bullets and explosions with little effort, match the speed of Spider-Man, and also leap incredible distances. But the most impressive of the symbiote's abilities is the healing factor awarded to its host, which can rapidly heal the host from practically all forms of physical injuries, including broken bones and severed limbs. Venom has also been shown to shrug off hits from Spider-Man and soak up gunfire without any major difficulty. He has even withstood the force of explosions and an uppercut from the Incredible Hulk. One thing to note, however, is two very distinct handicaps that the host for the symbiote must be careful of, that being a weakness to fire and high sound frequencies. Now, although Venom can withstand the force of explosions, he cannot withstand being engulfed by fire, as this will cause significant damage to the symbiote and kill it. And the same goes for its increased sensitivity to high sound, which was how Spider-Man was able to remove it from himself in the first place. But despite these weaknesses, and when all things are considered, those that the Venom symbiote chooses to bond with will be awarded with astounding physical power. This section was perhaps the easiest to decide. While Maul's strength and endurance is certainly remarkable, he simply doesn't compare to Venom in this regard. Venom has met the strength of more powerful opponents with his own might, and his regenerative healing factor provides him with a degree of endurance and durability that Maul cannot replicate. Maul may have an edge in terms of pure agility and acrobatic ability, however this will not be enough to grant him the physical advantage over Venom, especially when the Cleanser has faced opponents of similar acrobatic ability. As a result, Venom is awarded the advantage in physicality.
Round 2.
Trained as an enforcer, Darth Maul was crafted into a deadly lightsaber combatant. Darth Maul was a master of the Juyo lightsaber form, the seventh of the traditional forms. Juyo was an incredibly dangerous style, both to the user and to the adversary. It requires the user to fuel themselves with their passion and aggression and feed off the rush of battle, whilst unleashing a devastating barrage of fully offensive and unpredictable attacks. However, due to its inherent difficulty to use, practitioners must first have skills in other styles before learning this form. In Maul's case, these were the 4th and 6th forms of lightsaber combat, known as Ataru and Naiman respectively, as well as the unarmed martial art known as Terraskazi. Ataru also focused on a highly offensive onslaught, whilst the user made use of force-assisted acrobatics and the integration of unarmed physical strikes into one's attack sequences. Naiman was a balanced form that took various aspects from all previous styles and melded them into a fluid and balanced style that equipped the user with the knowledge to adapt to several different situations, as well as having the focus of applying force attacks into the user's maneuvers. In addition, both of these styles provided training in the art of dual blade fencing. Maul's use of Ataru is noted in the Maul Lockdown novel, in which he is described as using a weightless Ataru spin to decapitate a Trandoshan mercenary. Prior to the events of the Phantom Menace, Darth Plagueis already commented that Maul's use of Naiman and the Jarkai dual blade were masterful. Impressive, considering that the former is said to take approximately 10 years to master. The Terraskazi art was intended for ordinary beings to contend with Force users, by teaching them to close their minds off to opponents, allowing for greater unpredictability. Noted as a scheming mastermind, Darth Maul was a highly intelligent fighter. During the events of the Phantom Menace, he displayed complete control over the fight with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, using the environment and other means to separate them, and subsequently overwhelming them individually. In addition, Maul was fond of disrupting his enemy's focus with psychological warfare, by throwing off their focus with taunts, known as the Dun Mok technique. Although he was an incredibly smart individual, it must be noted that he was also very arrogant, which is what caused his initial defeat at the hands of Kenobi. Despite this, Maul has proven that more often than not, he is capable of standing toe-to-toe with some of the most formidable of opponents. After he was reunited with Kenobi, the Jedi Master noted that he and Asajj Ventress were outmatched against Maul and his brother Savage, forcing them to flee. In addition, Maul has bested several renowned Jedi among the likes of Anun Bandara and of course Qui-Gon Jinn, as well as briefly holding off the combined efforts of both Mace Windu and Aayla Secura, despite arguably being outmatched by the former. Despite any or all flaws that Darth Maul may possess, there is no denying that he is one of the deadliest combatants of his time, and posed a serious threat to the greatest masters of the Jedi Order. Whilst bonded to a host, the Venom symbiote grants its partner the ability to overcome several varieties of opponents, having gone toe-to-toe with the likes of Spider-Man, his own stronger symbiotic son Carnage, the Juggernaut, the Incredible Hulk, Ghost Rider, and the Sandman. He achieved this through the use of his primal and vicious mana, which granted him a great deal of unpredictability. In keeping with the symbiote's ability to absorb the knowledge and powers of its hosts, it would often make use of such abilities, with a much darker influence, causing the host to become more brutal and aggressive in their actions, sometimes removing their sense of morality. Although this could be seen as detrimental, it has proven to be something that many an enemy have proven to have difficulty dealing with. In the case of Spider-Man, this has caused the web-slinger to make use of his intelligence to get the better of Venom, since he has admitted that he can't win a head-to-head confrontation. Despite his brutal and what some might call a primitive approach, he has proven to be capable of catching opponents off guard and has displayed signs of tactical ingenuity. For example, he has been shown to make use of his tendrils to disarm adversaries of their weapons, and got the better of Scorpion by using this method to invade his cybernetic suit, causing it to malfunction and achieve victory. In addition, Venom was highly adept in the use of stealth, able to catch some of the most alert combatants off guard, which was bolstered through his unique camouflage ability, which we'll elaborate on later. As you might expect for someone known as the Lethal Protector, Venom has proven that it can forge even the most ordinary hosts into overwhelming and dangerous opponents, and has proven to be a great threat to some of the most powerful combatants within the Marvel Universe. This was an interesting section to cover. While Venom is certainly one slippery customer, and is without a doubt completely unrelenting, Maul simply possesses the skills necessary to combat this particular foe. While Venom may employ tactics to throw off his opponents, Maul is not one who falls into such traps easily, as he is always assessing his opponents and manipulating them whenever possible, as he has been trained to deal with opponents in this manner for his entire life. In addition, while I believe Maul would be pressured greatly and put on his back foot, I do see him eventually outwitting his opponent, which may force the Clintard to rely on other factors to best the Sith Lord. Due to his superior skill and tactical proficiency, Darth Maul was awarded the advantage in combative skill.
Round 3.
At the time of the Clone Wars, Darth Maul had been shown making use of his standard single-bladed lightsaber, and later on the unique black-bladed darksaber. However, for the sake of this video, we will be using Maul's double-bladed lightsaber. The reason for this is that it is the weapon he tends to prefer, as he even reverted back to using one in Rebels, as well as the final season of TCW. Originally two standard sabers that Maul had joined at the hilt, the saber staff's longer handle provided greater leverage on power attacks, thanks to its lengthier handle, along with the option of using one or both blades at once. While a difficult weapon to use and counter, when in the hands of a master such as Darth Maul, it was just as, if not even more deadly than the standard lightsaber. Since he wasn't trained to be a Sith in the traditional sense, Darth Maul lacked the ability to use certain high-level Force powers, such as Force Lightning. Despite this, Maul has proven that he can use the abilities he does possess to their utmost and give him the highest possible advantage in a fight. Already capable of masterfully augmenting his physicality, Maul could seep himself even further into the dark side through his use of Force Rage, granting him even deadlier boosts to his physicality, although this could lead him to being caught off guard if not careful. In addition, his original role as an assassin required him to become masterful in the use of Force Cloak, concealing himself and his Force signature from others. Maul has also shown a remarkable resistance to telepathic attacks, having gone so far as to cause another telepath to fall into a coma. But most impressive was Maul's use of telekinetic attacks. Having grown in power since his rebirth, Maul could absolutely thrash his opponents and surroundings with his telekinetics. Maul has been shown to ragdoll Obi-Wan Kenobi with enough force to collapse a cave between them, has pulled a ship off a cliff and thrown a massive group of enemies off a bridge whilst working in tandem with his brother. However, Maul wasn't devoid of using his powers in a more calculated manner. In several instances, he has made use of telekinetics to hurl objects at his opponents, manipulate the environment to catch enemies unawares, or grant himself a more suitable position in battle. He could make excellent and precise use of the saber throw technique to strike at his targets from notable distances. Maul's precision was also shown through his use of Force Choke and Force Crush, gripping his opponents and choking them out. In one instance, going so far as to use the technique known as Force Wound, which allowed the user to injure specific internal organs. Although he doesn't possess as broad of a skill set as many other Sith, Darth Maul has proven that his deep immersion in the dark side of the Force grants him a remarkable level of devastating power that could prove a serious threat to even the most powerful of adversaries. Venom, much like all symbiotes, possesses some rather unique abilities that make him and his host deadly monsters in battle. We've already made note of the incredible physical powers that the symbiote grants to the host, but what else do they gain? First is the symbiote's ability to absorb the memories and even certain powers of previous hosts, and grant them to the current one. For example, since being bonded with Spider-Man, Venom has made use of his own webbing abilities, and even obtained the Spider Sense, as well as being immune to Peter Parker's own. The Spider Sense is a tingling sensation that alerts the user to incoming danger. The more serious or closer the threat, the greater the awareness of said threat. However, one thing that must be noted is that while the Spider Sense does warn its users to incoming danger, the ability to react is still down to their own speed and reflexes. But it is nevertheless something that is always welcome in a confrontation. In addition, thanks to its liquid-like nature, the symbiote possesses excellent shape-shifting abilities, allowing it to manipulate its limbs into tendrils that can strike foes from a distance, along with creating things such as spikes, axes, shields, as well as alter his size, thus granting him even greater physical strength should he choose to grow bigger. Though he can also do the opposite and manipulate himself on a molecular level, such as when Venom and Carnage shrunk themselves and fought inside the internet. Such an ability is what allowed Venom to perform the aforementioned feat of disabling Scorpion's suit, as well as perform similar achievements such as being able to disable other mechanical armaments, such as firearms. In keeping with being a slippery customer, Venom was also capable of camouflage, allowing its host to either get the drop on an unsuspecting target or flee from an encounter. Alongside these abilities, the symbiote can also telepathically communicate with its host, and also has some resistance to telepathic attacks. All in all, the Venom symbiote is nothing but a power enhancer to its hosts, and will prove to be of substantial benefit to anyone that it bonds with. While Venom's immunity to Peter Parker's spider sense is a useful tool against the web slinger, this does not mean that he could take advantage of it in the same way against the Force user's precognition. As established within Marvel Comics, Venom was only unreadable to Parker's spider sense, due to the fact that they had been previously bonded, and those members of the spider family that he possessed no bond with were still able to sense him. After that, this section comes down to a comparison of their respective danger senses and Maul's use of the Force versus Venom's shapeshifting and invisibility. Stealth is an unlikely factor in this matchup, as both possess great spatial awareness enhanced by their respective senses. However, I'm inclined to believe that Maul's use of the Force, specifically in regards to his telekinesis, is what grants him the edge here. To put it simply, Venom's ability to shapeshift and form weapons requires him to be within a certain range for him to take full advantage of them, whereas Maul's powerful use of telekinesis does not, and thus can also be used to keep Venom at a distance. Furthermore, Maul has an ability with Consume Essence, a power that allows a Darksider to feed off of the aggression of an opponent, fueling their own output, as he was described as doing so against Obi-Wan in their first bout. This would be of benefit against someone as aggressive as Venom. There is also the factor of Maul's lightsaber. In the Fusion video featuring these characters, I received a comment claiming that Venom could heal if he were cut by a lightsaber. While I agree with this statement, we mustn't forget that the lore has established multiple times that a lightsaber cut burns through the target, meaning that if Venom is cut by a lightsaber, this will result in a decline in his ability to heal and maintain control over his mass. As it stands, Darth Maul's use of the Force and his deadly weapon award him the advantage for his arsenal.
Final round.
Darth Maul and Venom are some of my favourite characters in all of fiction, and ever since analysing them as a fusion over a year ago, I've wanted to pit them against each other, and so here we are. The advantage to the victor of this matchup is a minus 6 out of 10. I actually envision this fight as a more intense version of the fight Maul had with the Wampa in the Lockdown novel, while later proceeding to Maul's final clash with Qui-Gon Jinn, with Maul standing in for himself, and Venom taking the place of the Wampa and Jinn. Given how it is standard for him, I believe that Venom would engage first, charging headfirst into the battle, going full bore and attempting to overwhelm Maul as soon as possible. At first, Maul will be driven onto his back foot, being forced to evade every incoming attack, and fall into something of a retreat. Venom's constant and unrelenting savagery would pressure the Sith Lord hard, scoring several glancing blows, always managing to keep the Sith Lord within reach, thanks to his shapeshifting abilities. This would eventually force Maul to call on his use of the dark side to keep Venom at bay, slowing his momentum through the Zabrak's powerful use of telekinesis. Once this takes effect, Venom would either attempt to ramp things up, in which case the battle would continue as before, or he would attempt a stealthy approach. However, by this point, he would find that in both instances, Maul would be ready and prepared for anything, and his greater tactical mind, superior training, and Force-sensitive intuition would grant him the clarity he needs to effectively counter everything the symbiote throws at him. Eventually, Maul would take advantage of his tactical insight and lure Venom into his comfort zone, eventually scoring a solid strike with his lightsaber. Upon doing so, Venom would screech in agony. Not wasting a single heartbeat, Maul unleashes the pinnacle of his Juyo mastery, slicing the liquid alien to ribbons, leaving nothing but a helpless Eddie Brock on the ground, gazing over him. Whether he would try to flee or fight back is anyone's guess, but in both instances, the Zabrak lifts him up with the Force and impales him through the stomach, ending his life. Battered, beaten, bleeding, but otherwise victorious, Darth Maul is declared the winner of the match. And there you have it, Darth Maul vs Venom. I love both of these characters, so it makes me sad to see one of them lose. But I did my best to look at this matchup objectively, and so I hope you guys enjoyed, regardless of your opinions on the verdict. Maul will be taking a break from the Versus series for now, so I can move on to some new faces for the channel. Well, that's all I've got to say on the matchup, guys, so until next time, be sure to follow me on Twitter for updates, and like always, have a great day.